No, check the Skype chat right now.
A Skype chat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I forgot to do that, didn't I? I forgot to go live.
That's okay. I'm recording it. I actually
That's all right.
recorded
No.
everything you guys
We'll
said.
be live. We're live. Okay.
Okay. Well, just so you know, you can
yep.
add in what we just had later because I just recorded everything.
Okay. All right. Then let's keep going. That was my bad. Sorry about that.
Okay. So are we live now?
We're live now.
Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. Now I left off with basically the events leading up to what later happened in the smoking gun memo. So let me go through that again. Basically, 3 events and spread out over a period of 11 years. The catalyst for all this began with a meeting that we know about between sixth man to walk on the moon, Edgar Mitchell, Stephen Greer, who was working with Mitchell back in 1997 when this meeting took place, and Admiral Wilson, who was a high-ranking naval intelligence officer. That meeting actually took place. The 3 people I just mentioned have all confirmed it. Admiral Wilson confirming to Billy Cox in 2008 that the meeting did in fact take place. There has been some disagreement over the years as to what the follow-up of that was. The follow-up as far as this particular smoking gun document is basically that the whole thing did happen, and that Admiral Wilson is recounting the back end of what happened as a result of that 97 meeting that did happen to Eric Davis. So sorry about that, but yeah, let's pick it up from there if we can, Michael. The meeting allegedly taking place on, let me check that date again. The meeting...
April 9th.
April 9th. Got it. Okay, April 9th. Okay.
Giuliano Marinkovic, it says maybe the 10th, but Edgar Mitchell is saying that it did take place on the 9th of April, 1997. So it's in that ballpark here. Obviously.
Okay, got it. All right, and then we've got this meeting. Let's go to the early pages here. Let me pull up the documents themselves so I can refer to them. It'll be easier for me to see it on my computer screen in a separate window, so I'll be able to keep it a little bit more track here. There it is. Okay.
And obviously now you've mentioned the scientist, Dr. Eric Davis. I think we have to explain who he is.
Sure.
And actually how he got in touch with Admiral Wilson in the first place, because I think that is a part of the story that needs to be told. This is a high-level government scientist. Eric Davis, one of probably the most intelligent hominids on the planet, I'm telling you. And this guy basically has been dogging many of the high-ranking people in the military and everything, trying to find information about UFO crash retrievals. And I want to give kudos initially to Dr. Davis, and then of course to Admiral Wilson for actually even agreeing to have this meeting where we end up finally getting notes from the meeting about what took place.
Oh, sorry about that, Chant. I thought you were going to jump in there. Okay, yeah. Then they have this meeting, and the very first page of the notes is this meeting is going to take place at roughly the intersection of Greer and Paradise. Now, I don't know if you've run this down, but that is an intersection in Las Vegas. Okay. And the meeting is supposedly at the EG&G Special Projects building. So we've got the local map up. And basically, there it is. Paradise looks like it's running north to south, Greer roughly east to west. And as you look down the street a little bit on Greer, you see a building URS. And in fact, that is the name of the current parent company or owner of EG&G. I don't know if anybody's run that down and laid that out on a map, but I would have to say it's likely the same building. This is almost certainly where the meeting took place. So I want folks to get a good look at it. That part checks out. That's very good, Michael.
Yeah. And by the way, Dr. Davis is told by his contacts to show up at 10 o'clock sharp a.m. in the morning behind or at the Special Projects building at EG&G so he can have his meeting with Admiral Wilson. Now, the first note, which is a little humorous, I believe, on this transcript, is a note by Dr. Davis that the Admiral was 10 minutes late. So actually,
has anyone confirmed that Wilson was in Las Vegas on this date?
I don't know about that. Good question.
That might be something that, going back and asking him, hey, did you meet with Eric Davis and tell him all about the crash retrieval program? He's probably going to say no, but I mean, if he was there, it said he was there for a speaking engagement. If that was mentioned in the memo,
No.
Wilson's purpose, he didn't travel to Vegas just to meet with Eric Davis.
Yeah, I'm not sure the purpose of him being there, but the idea is that he is pulling up in his staff car with his petty officer driver and two other uniformed officers, naval officers, I believe, in this this staff car. And the Admiral is dressed in civilian clothes in a suit.
Well, he's retired at this point. Is that I believe that is correct.
Yes. Right.
He's not going to be. And like I said, I believe I can't remember on what page. I really don't want to scroll through that now. But the reason he's there is it is a speaking engagement. And the reason Eric Davis is in Vegas is because he lives there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was finally getting this meeting that he's been trying to get for quite some time. And they actually meet themselves, just the two of them, Dr. Davis and Admiral Wilson, in the back seat of the staff car, while the other guys leave and go to a meeting inside the building. And for the next hour and 10 minutes is basically how this interview took place. And Eric Davis is asking all sorts of questions to the Admiral. This is something that is starting the actual transcript. I believe, by the way, my personal belief is that this transcript is so detail-oriented, 15 pages long. I would assume that Dr. Davis is recording this meeting, and he might even be taking simultaneous notes, to kind of supplement it. But I believe the details are so detailed that he probably is recording, and then he's going to transcribe it immediately thereafter or shortly thereafter.
And apparently the reason that Wilson is willing to meet with Davis is because of the AOK from somebody named Okie Shannon. Do you know anything more about that fellow? That's a name that's new to me. Have you looked into him much?
Well, I've cursorily looked into who Okie Shannon is, and he is a longtime insider military naval commander that is a longtime friend of Admiral Wilson. So basically, Admiral Wilson is telling Davis at this point that the only reason he's meeting with him is Okie Shannon gave him the go-ahead and vouched for Dr. Davis.
I didn't look too closely at Okie Shannon, but the only thing that I really found that was of interest...
And by the way...
I'm sorry? You're breaking up a little bit.
Well, I understand that Okie Shannon has recently passed away or is so ill he cannot talk or give any information out at this point. So he was quite elderly at this time as well.
Understood. And at the bottom of page 2, the initials JA come up. And, I just mentioned John Alexander. I was trying to think of somebody who JA might be, and, well, those initials fit. Any thoughts on that? Don't trust JA, a liar, blah, blah, blah. Whoever JA is, it seems like the Admiral doesn't like him much.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, this is my understanding that it is John Alexander.
Okay. Got it. And then the document kind of shifts gears. And there's a 2-page letter to Davis from Will Miller.
Yes, and Will Miller was one of the people present with Stephen Greer and Edgar Mitchell at this initial meeting. So we're talking about Will Miller sending this letter to Dr. Davis in a personal correspondence. Actually, it's about some business as well in this letter that is very fascinating.
Right, and I want to get to that, but I want to tell the folks at home that over the last couple of days, we have had the opportunity to, both Chant and I, to interview Will Miller. And he had some, obviously, some very interesting comments, in particular about the letter here. And I got to zoom in a little bit on my monitor here to read that particular point. Firstly, just let me tell you a little bit about the interview because it was pretty interesting. I think there was some talk actually of having you on Sunday, and I didn't want to do that because we didn't have this bit of information nailed down at that point. So I'm glad we had these last couple of days. And like I said, I was able to talk to Commander Miller yesterday, and then Chant was able to do the same today. And let's see. Oh, yeah. Well, the point regarding the letter, Miller's comment, I spoke to him yesterday. He had not seen it. He was not even aware that it was out. He, before I was really able to begin the conversation, he stressed skepticism towards any leaked documents, before I could even tell him about this. And his name is all over it. So he was not aware of the recent releases. No one had contacted him about them. So nobody's contacted this guy. Let me jump in here and add that as Eric Davis is basically provided a few different researchers with a no comment. And as far as I know, no one has attempted to contact Wilson. And at this point, I think the thing to do, if you can't pin it down independently, would be to contact him directly and see if he was actually in Vegas on that date to try to, add a little bit more credibility to the document itself. If it would be a problem for you. Let's put it this way: it would be a problem for you, Michael, if it turned out he was actually in Minneapolis on that date, would it not?
Well, I am going to defer to Richard Dolan on the actual document itself and how difficult or easy it is going to be to debunk. As you know, basically Richard Dolan is calling this the UFO document leak of potentially the century.
I understand.
And he is also saying that this document is so detailed and names so many people, so many programs, so many dates, that is going to be very difficult to actually debunk itself. So even if someone comes up with information that says that Admiral Wilson was not in Vegas on that day, you got to wonder, why would someone go to the details of this 15-page document and put everything else in order that seems to check out? It's very interesting.
Do you mind if?
I mean, I could tell you right now, there are people who like, basically hoaxing the UFO community. I mean, they're out there. It's been done before. But again, let me go a little bit further with my interview with Commander Miller. Now, when I spoke to him yesterday, he could not remember if he had written Davis a letter. He didn't know anything about it. At that point, he hadn't seen him. Chant contacted him today after he did have a chance to look it over, and basically he told Chant that he thinks it might be a cut and paste edit of multiple letters he might have sent to someone other than Davis. He doesn't recall Davis at all. He says, there are a couple things in particular in there. He mentioned the paragraph mentioning Bob Beckwith. That looked to him like something he definitely wrote. But he also said that he never had knowledge of dealing with recovered ET vehicles, so that section of the letter he would not have written. He's saying that he did not write that. So it looks, his position after looking it over says it looks like somebody got hold of some correspondence that I sent out, and some of those paragraphs look legit, but some of the other stuff, no, that's not me. Okay, so that's where he's at.
He also stated that Eric Davis was not at that meeting with he and Bob Beckwith on that evening, and so he was wondering how anybody would want to connect, or why anybody would want to connect Eric Davis to that period of time regarding he and Mr. Bob Beckwith having that actual meeting, which he did confirm they did have. And so he had a concern about that. And he also did state, because I had about a 35-minute interview with him today, that this letter was stitched together. And there are a few areas that he knows he's not responsible for at all, like they're fiction, pure fiction. And then other areas that he's he does say genuinely do sound like what he would write in the manner and the style in which he would write, but that this absolutely was stitched together. It's literally a collage of information.
Yeah, and also he had mentioned the sort of the header, the letterhead on it.
Yes, I had more to say on that.
Okay, got it. Okay,
yes,
go ahead.
So
sorry about that.
He was going to say, well, basically, I did ask him about that, and he said that anybody can actually take the letterhead, that insignia, and put it on a letter, and so that didn't make that was not authentic to him, because he said that he would have a much crisper, clear letterhead. I understand people will say, well, that could be a copy of a copy of a copy, but again, just want to restate that this letter does not ring true to him. He said he does not know Eric Davis, and we went into detail regarding Eric Davis. He said that he does not recall ever having associated with him at any point in time, ever. And so that's something that's really important to note. And
let me ask a question on that.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
There is one strange thing that in this letter mentions at the very bottom about his question. This would be Will Miller's question to them about a potential pepper spray manufacturer. Mm-hmm. Did Commander Miller mention that that was something that he said, or did he deny all of the thing other than the fact that the Beckwith meeting took place?
Yeah, I can find out from him because he's been very responsive to me.
Oh, wonderful. Well,
yeah. Because I actually spoke to him. I actually communicated with him twice today.
Oh, good. What else?
I only talked to him once.
What's that?
Michael. Michael, let me tell you something.
Wait, Michael, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask. He said that he confirmed or denied certain things. What else did he actually confirm from this letter?
What?
Go ahead. It doesn't relate to the letter, so you finish up with the letter, and then
we'll
talk
ahead,
about some
Frank.
other things that we talked about. All right. Also, he said that regarding the Wilson Mitchell Greer meeting, that there was some follow-up. Obviously, Greer and Mitchell basically saying some of the things that turn up in this memo, that Wilson was threatened, that he wasn't allowed access, and so on. Basically, all the details that the memo goes into. And Commander Miller took more of Wilson's side on this. That he said that eventually, essentially what Wilson said to Billy Cox was accurate, that there really was no follow-through. And that also he added, this is getting back to Davis, he does not believe Wilson would have met with Davis. That's basically my thumbnail notes from the other stuff that we got. Now, one thing that this was actually, oddly enough, one of the most important questions that I had to ask him. Because we had you on the show before, and I'd gone through a lot of old known FOSI material, and there are certain tropes, certain patterns that they use, and that I thought it was very interesting that when you get to page 13, back. Okay, on page 13, I thought this was really interesting. And, I'm really into this, but towards the end there, I finally see it. And what I see is the Miller questions asked. This is why I feel so lucky that I was able to talk to this guy and that Commander Miller returned my call. Because this, to me, really jumped out as being very, very odd and very reminiscent of a FOSI-type material. Now, Will Miller is an inside guy, and he's also somebody who is interested in UFOs. He does communicate about them. He is interested. But what Miller is supposedly asking, according to the Admiral on page 13, is that he's asking about Roswell. Okay, not unreasonable there. He's asking about the Holloman Air Force Base landing, and he's also asking about Socorro, the Zamora case. And I have to tell you that this is absolutely something that has happened in the Serpo material, where there's an attempt to tie the Zamora landing and saying that the Holloman Air Force Base meeting was actually the same date as the Zamora case. That lumping those together like that is very curious to me, and again is a kind of a pattern. And if you look at the pattern that takes place in the story of this memo, where the Admiral Wilson recounts his tale of being led into the room of a corporation that is an aerospace corporation that is controlling this UFO functioning material, this craft. It's very reminiscent of the briefing that Reagan got in the Serpo material, and it's right down to. Let me see if I can find that. So. There's the list of all the Miller questions asked, okay? And basically asking about a lot of known Fozy stuff, MJ-12 and leaked documents, some more back up there with the Holloman Air Force Base. Obviously, Bentwaters is Rendlesham Forest. That's a solid case. But there they all are, lumped together very, very oddly, and that struck me as being very odd. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask the commander when I had the chance to talk to him was, these are the questions that you supposedly asked. Do they mean anything to you? It doesn't make sense that a guy with your kind of background is going to be asking about this particular list of questions. And he said he'd never been interested in Socorro, in the Socorro case. He really didn't know too much about it. And he actually asked me for some details about it. And I knew a little bit. We talked a little bit about the case. But he said he really didn't know that much about it. And that's what strikes me as odd. Like, you're going to remember what your favorite cases are. You're going to remember the cases that you asked about in a particular meeting, or you're feeding questions to the admiral. It's not clear whether he's at this meeting or not with the corporate types that we'll get into a little bit later on. But what he does say that he doesn't know this case, and it doesn't make any sense that somebody would be asking about this case at within the context of the memo is a very important meeting. And then years later, you're not going to forget what your favorite cases are. You're going to remember why you liked them, and that has the ring of not being true to me. That has the ring of Fozy disinformation, and we kind of talked about it. And I'm seeing it here, and I'm seeing it, and I'm getting confirmation of it from the commander. I've got looking through these documents. I've got some real problems with them there, Michael.
Well, one thing I think we need to clarify there: they are titled Miller questions here. Right. That Commander Wilson was asking this private. Civilian contractor once he finally got a meeting with these folks. Right.
And the implication and the context that's presented in is that these are questions that that Miller wanted answered, whether he's actually in the meeting or whether the admiral is passing them along just to get them answered.
Well, you made a very correct distinction right there. These are questions that Miller had asked during the previous 1997 meeting with Dr. Mitchell and Stephen Greer. They supposedly in this meeting, they talked privately for 2 hours after the briefing. Will Miller and Admiral Wilson. So basically, Admiral Wilson now is kind of remembering those issues and questions that they were talking about. There's no attribution that Commander Miller actually knows the details of the Lonnie Zamora or the Bentwaters or even the Holloman base, Air Force Base landing, supposedly. So it might be incorrect to assume that these are his favorite cases, Will Miller's. It might be more correct to assume that these are things that he is very interested in, would like to know the answers.
Okay. And as the meeting goes on, let's get a little bit more into the meeting itself. I was jumping ahead a little bit, but once they get past the letter, it gets into the meat of, basically the Admiral Wilson's sort of journey to ending up in meeting with these unnamed corporate types.
Well, Frank, let's not skip over the meat of the matter of that letter of 4 particulars that this letter is claiming that Will Miller can provide to Hal Puthoff and Dr. Davis. Did you happen to ask Commander Miller whether he actually made these statements about billion government company that can do reverse engineering and involved on the East Coast, the big supposedly a flap on the East Coast? I'm wondering if he denied specifically any of those 4 things that are mentioned in this letter.
Well, some of them we got. Some of them he said definitely, and he also certainly was clear that he had no knowledge of any kind of ET technology or working with anything along those lines.
So some of them meaning how many? All four?
We didn't ask the specific questions that you came up with. We had other questions.
Oh, well, these aren't questions. These are just things that are in the memo saying that he knew about and was able to supply to to Davis. So
Right.
I was just wondering if he's denying specifically all these four items. And I mean, anybody can read these items now, so it's not like a secret. But I sure would. I mean, I'm the attorney on the cross-examination stand trying to find out, okay, what about these things that are listed in here? Can you confirm or deny any one of them or all of them?
Okay, yeah, I can ask him that. He did say that he does know Hal Puthoff, but he doesn't like he never communicated with him in person. It was always in a sort of an indirect manner. But also he does know John Alexander, and he does not know Kit Green at all. He doesn't know him.
But it sounds to me that he's totally denying to both of you that he wrote this letter to Eric Davis.
Oh, yes, absolutely. He's saying that he does not have anything to do with this letter, and that it was stitched together, and parts of it of that stitching together are fictional, and other parts are genuine from letters he's had in the past, and that the Beckwith meeting was absolutely correct, that did occur, but that Eric Davis had nothing to do with it. And then just for the heck of it, I know it's not relevant, but I asked him if he knew Grant Cameron or you, and he says he doesn't know either one of you. Not that he should. I just asked anyway.
Yeah, good for you.
But he does know John Alexander, and he does know him well.
Yes, definitely. And specifically, the strange request at the very end of the letter about this pepper spray manufacturing company. Did he deny that is anything he ever wrote?
That's not a specific I got into.
Yeah, I didn't get into that, but I can ask him that tonight.
Because indeed, if the Beckwith thing is correct at the very top of the letter, I'm wondering at the very end of the letter, there is this thing thrown in that has nothing to do with the other items that are listed there. I'm wondering if that is correct either. And someone might have just pasted all of these things in the middle. That would give us a little clue if he is confirming the final paragraph of this letter.
Well, he can't. Okay, so we went over the document, and he said that he does not believe it's authentic.
Right, but he did agree that this Beckwith meeting happened.
It did. This is sort of what my question was, and I'll ask him this later. And that is, I do also cannot forget to mention, by the way, before I say what I'm going to say, is that he did not find this letter in any of his files either, because he did look for it. He did research regarding this letter. He looked it up in his files, and it was not there. Just as an extra, because he was asked about it.
Well, why would he look for it if he knew that he didn't write it?
Because he was asked about it. So he did his own due diligence, and there was no letter of that sort in his files.
Okay, so in other words, he went and looked.
Yes, and he is saying that despite that research, he can also say with confidence that this letter is not authentic from him. He did not write this letter, and he doesn't know Eric Davis. So this sort of begs the question. Now, how would anybody know that he had a meeting with Beckwith, Bob? And so that just sort of makes me wonder, is this some kind of a situation where somebody had access to his files or some files somewhere, someone's files, and took part and parcel from those files having to do with these folks, and then stitched them together? Because one part of this letter is authentic, and other parts to him sound like, the style, the cadence, and how he might write. But the rest of it does not look like what he would write at all. And he has nothing to do with UFO crash retrievals or UFO anything. He did say he has nothing to do with any kind of ET technology whatsoever. So my question then is, and I know he couldn't answer this, but it's just an open question. Would this letter have been put together by an intelligence agent?
It could be, for sure. Yeah. It's very interesting to me that Commander Miller.
Let me ask you. I mean, Michael, I've obviously got some problems with the whole document, but I suppose that somebody could have taken the legitimate Eric Davis notes and just popped this letter in there.
Yeah.
Since it's really not connected at all with the.
That's what I'm getting at too, because it's very interesting that Commander Miller is confirming that this Beckwith meeting took place. And in the letter itself, it's mentioning that Mr. Beckwith, who's quite a famous scientist here, is working on a force model of the universe, including research in levitation, teleportation, and time travel. That alone is kind of earth-shattering. And if indeed Commander Miller is actually confirming that meeting took place, I would be interested in learning about that.
Okay, so we've got some leads to follow up on, and I think the interesting one is, I think it's doable, is to confirm whether or not the Admiral was in Vegas. But anyway, the whole memo basically leads up to Admiral Wilson recounting to Davis basically his efforts to get through to an aerospace company, that one of our defense contractors, and that they've apparently got the whole kit and caboodle. And he's having a tough time figuring out the money trail. And he finally, after talking to them on the phone, physically goes out west somewhere and sits down and meets with this group.
Yes, and this is a fascinating idea where basically, I guess about 10 days to 2 weeks after the meeting that he had with Edgar Mitchell, Miller, and Stephen Greer, Admiral Wilson starts making phone calls. He gets a little curious, at least that's what this document says. And indeed, he goes to some of his friends, some of his colleagues in the Pentagon, and they kind of give him clues where to go to find this civilian organization that might be dealing with UFOs and crash retrieval programs. And of course, the funny thing is that all of a sudden, Admiral Wilson says he made 3 phone calls and tracked down this one subcontractor, civilian subcontractor, and called them up, talked to the program director and said, hey, what's going on? I haven't been briefed by you guys on what you're doing, and I want to know what you are doing with UFO crash retrievals. Now, right there, I can see the look on the face of this program manager going, oh my God, what happened? How did he get to us?
And he does get to them, and it's very interesting the way he recounts the exchange, because there are some similarities between this particular meeting as described and also a meeting that is in the Serpo material, which I regard as fake, to be blunt about it. So let's talk about the meeting. The trope is the same. The scene setup is basically the same. The identified leader walks into the room, and he is going to be told about something that is way beyond his wildest imagination. So basically, what Wilson gets to the vault. Basically, he's taken down into a secure vault. Basically, where he has his meeting. Reagan has his meeting at Camp David. But I just think it's really interesting that he meets with this group, Wilson does, that's called the Watch Committee or the Gatekeepers. And going back to Serpo, Reagan is briefed on, the keys to the kingdom, everything you would possibly want to know about ET and UFOs by somebody called the Caretaker. It feels like fiction to me, Michael. I got to be honest about it. It feels like fiction I've read before.
All right. Well, I tell you what, it's kind of interesting because once he actually gets a meeting, by the way, that first phone call that he makes to the program manager, the program manager stammers and stutters and says, Admiral, we have to talk about this. We will call you and make a face-to-face meeting so that there is an agreement that he's going to get a call back. And indeed he does. And he goes, he says he flies out there. So I'm assuming if he's in the Pentagon on the East Coast, it's like you said, on the West Coast.
And most of the big aerospace defense contractors are out West anyway. So
yeah. And obviously then he gets there and goes to the vault and meets these folks. And he is confronted with three people. Initially, the program director, and the security director for the company, and the company attorney. Now, these are the gatekeepers. They call themselves, by the way, right. And they are basically there to keep a lid on things because they tell the admiral that there was a major breach in confidence of them during a government audit by the Pentagon, actually, in the past. That made a big brouhaha, and they had to put a lid on that so it would never happen again. The interesting thing about it is that the head of security for this civilian company is a retired NSA officer and counterintelligence expert. And then you've got the project manager and you've got the attorney. And they're telling him, actually, the first part of the meeting is they are trying to quiz Admiral Wilson on how the heck they found him, or he found them. He's going, who did you talk to? They wanted particulars. And of course, Admiral Wilson's being a little cagey, didn't really tell them exactly who he got the information from. But there's a fascinating statement in this document where Admiral Wilson confirms that he had talked to 4 other different program directors who all of them referred them back to this private contractor. The contractor just basically freaked at that point going, oh my God, if 4 other contractors or civilian organizations know about us, we are in big trouble. That's one issue in this whole thing.
Okay, Chant, you have anything?
No, I think I said everything I needed to say. It was nice being able to actually have had a conversation in such detail with Commander Will Miller today. And I was very grateful that he actually took the time to have spoken to me, not only by phone, but by Skype and by email. And so I went over everything as carefully as I could with him. But look, you know, it's not like we had a lot of time to talk. And, you know, I asked everything I could that I felt he was going to give me permission to ask. People need to understand that there's a point where even if you have the discretionary time to talk to somebody, that does not mean they are going to answer every question. And so what I'm going to do...
Let me go back to how we made contact with the commander. Basically, I've been trying to track him down and leave messages, and I was pretty shocked. He called me back right before I was leaving for work, so I didn't have a whole lot of time. But the 2 main questions I really wanted to ask him was, did he remember writing the Davis memo? And the way he responded me at that point in time, when he knew nothing about the documents, was he didn't remember. Which, you know, seems like a reasonable answer. Who's necessarily going to remember off the top of their head writing a letter 17 years ago? So I didn't have any problem with that. And then basically what I wanted to do was to confirm if he was particularly interested in each of those cases that per this document he says that he is. And obviously when he drew a blank at Socorro, that to me raised a red flag. And then, you know, obviously I left it at that because I had to go. And I said, would it be okay if we followed up? And he said, yes, that'll be fine. And then Chant followed up today. And that's basically how that exchange went. And I think maybe you guys have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and maybe firm a few things up. That the document itself is being called into question by the only person who has would have some direct knowledge, with Eric Davis not talking, and nobody has apparently contacted the Admiral. It's you know, we've got somebody who's directly involved, and he's expressing a lot of skepticism about this. And I got to say that they're pretty reasonable skepticisms. And one of the things that I asked him about, that I was skeptical about in reading, that really wouldn't have meant anything to him necessarily, you know, he gave the answer that makes me even more skeptical. So, I think we raised some serious questions here that has got to get answered on that end. Whoever wants to pick up the ball, it seems that there are enough people out there that like this memo. They think there's something to it. Well, they've got to answer some questions they should be able to answer. The one I'd like to know is, can they confirm that Leahy was in Vegas on that appointment date? That would be one that I think shouldn't be that difficult to do, and I think you guys need to do it fairly quickly.
Well, Frank, let me ask you this. Did you use the 4 particulars in that Will Miller letter to refresh his memory about those 4 points?
We did not. Like I said, Chant did the follow-up yesterday. I was surprised when he got back to me. I had 10 minutes with him. I got the 2 questions answered that he wanted. But remember, he hadn't seen the documents at that point. Chant was able to go through a little bit of detail. And basically, I think it's pretty cut and dry here. Basically, what Commander Miller is saying, that this document appears to be something that was constructed, that was cut and pasted, that some of that material does look like his writing from the past. So maybe somebody involved in putting this together had some correspondence with him from who knows when, way back in the day. And that is something that can be done. It's been done before in terms of putting together forged documents, so it wouldn't be the first time.
I do have a question for you, Michael,
Sure.
regarding the last paragraph that you brought up. I'm just going to read that last paragraph, where it says,
basically, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but a thought popped into my head, and it's such a rare occasion that I want to get out with it. Basically, what Commander Miller is saying is that his letter is a forgery. I think that's fair. I think it's a fair way to put it.
Well, but obviously, if he doesn't know the details of the letter,
he's seen it. He saw it when Chant followed up with him today.
And did then follow up on
Michael, if the letter is constructed even in part, it's still a fake. It's still a forgery.
Oh yeah, but on the witness stand, you say, well, tell me what parts are true and what parts are not true. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Well, even if all the parts are true and it's reconstructed, it's still a reconstruction. It's still a fake.
Well,
it's taking bits and pieces of, let's say, everything that he wrote. He said, okay, I definitely wrote that. And okay, you want to follow up with some of the things that he confirms there that would be pretty hot and worth following up on. But even if every bit of that letter was actually written by the commander, it's been reconstructed through a number of different correspondences that he engaged in, it's still a fake.
Well, if indeed any of those particulars are correct and he wrote about them, that would be very fascinating.
Well, it would be. Absolutely, it would be. Absolutely, it would be. No question about that.
That's what we need to get to the bottom line on, the details. Which ones did he say are correct? Because he did say the Beckwith thing is correct.
Correct. That is interesting in and of itself. Absolutely. But
of course.
The commander's never denied a guy being interested in that kind of thing. He is. There's no question about that.
Of course. And then we need to get to his particulars that he denies, just to kind of confirm, okay, this is put together. What of these things are things that you did not write? That would be interesting.
And at this early date, we need a little bit more time with that. But yeah, I mean, basically, he did confirm he had no knowledge of ET crash retrieval or technology in our hands and that sort of thing, as sort of a broad, general denial of having a direct knowledge or direct involvement in that sort of thing. So, I mean, we can make some inferences. We can pin him down. We can make him more clear, and we want to be clear here. We want to be fair to everybody, but at the same time, Chant did get that today, and some other things could be cleared up, though, no doubt. But I think we made some very interesting points that really raised some serious questions about the documents.
Okay, so what I did was I went ahead and I made sure, first of all, that the document we were talking about was one and the same document that Frank had gone over with Will Miller. And because the reason why I did that is because, various different copies of this smoking gun memo, I'm not saying there are, but there could be different types of copies or variations out there. And to make sure we were talking about the same smoking gun memo, we went over it. And he confirmed that was the correct and same one, because it's the same one that Frank gave me. So it was the same exact document. And then we also went over a different document. I'm just going to go ahead and mention it, Frank. Okay.
Sure.
We went over, and Michael, will you please remind me to go over that last paragraph in the letter, if you don't mind, the one that you mentioned before?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I went over also on Skype. By this point in time, we were talking on Skype. Commander Will Miller and I were, regarding the alien autopsy, the emails, email communications between allegedly between Bob Bigelow, Eric Davis, Colm Kelleher, and I don't know, maybe a few others. But anyway, this, yes, thank you. Allegedly by Kit Green as well. So we went over that. I had him actually go over the document, scroll through it, look at it, scrutinize it. And he said that this was just absolutely foreign to him. Like this, none of this made any sense to him. He did not recognize, not that he should, but he did not recognize this document at all, that it had nothing to do with him. He was sort of bewildered by it. And okay, and then moving along to the, and by the way, I did ask him just for the heck of it, does he know Bob Bigelow? And he says, no, he does not. He does not know him personally. He knows who he is, and he knows, what he may be known for, but anyway, he does not know him personally. And again, he does not know Colm Kelleher either, and he does not know Kit Green. Now, moving along to the other document regarding the smoking gun memo. The last paragraph, which I'm going to read for our listeners because Michael's brought it up a few times, and it says, finally, I have a request. I am trying to locate a company in Las Vegas, Nevada, which some years ago manufactured a specialized disabling pepper spray for the military and law enforcement. The company was called One Mark Inc., and it says the address of it, and I knew its VP, a Mr. Joe Zuccaro. Any help in locating him and or the company would be appreciated. Best regards, Will Miller. And so regarding that paragraph, what I was going to ask you, and by the way, listeners, just so you know what I'm reading, that is the letter that Commander Will Miller was alleged to have written to Eric Davis, which he denies that he wrote it. He says it's not a letter he wrote. Anyway, what I was going to ask you, Michael, is why is that paragraph? I know there's other paragraphs and 3 other points you had that are important to you, but why is that one so important to you?
Well, it would be very interesting to find out whether Commander Miller had a very interesting either fascination or wanted to find information about this pepper spray company. We would want to ask him, does he know this Mr. Zuccaro? Has he ever heard of Mr. Zuccaro? Specifically, there's an actual address of this company that used to be located in Vegas. So that last paragraph seems to not be a part of the normal document. So the question that I have is, okay, is the Beckwith thing correct? And then down at the bottom, is that paragraph correct about the pepper spray company? And if those 2 things are correct, by the way, then maybe the argument that the other stuff in between has been put together and cut and pasted. So that's why I thought it would be very interesting to ask him those questions.
Well, he did say that he felt that the letter in its entirety was stitched together.
Okay, but stitched together doesn't really mean that he didn't write it.
Oh, okay, but he said that he did not write parts of it. He knows that for a fact.
We need to find out which parts he didn't write. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And so, again, he didn't say this, but this is a hypothetical, and I'm sorry to have you repeat yourself, but let's just pretend that he said, oh, yeah, no, I wrote that. That's from another letter. So you're saying that if he were to confirm that as having been authentic, that one paragraph from another letter, that would do what?
Well, that would show that basically some of these things are correct paragraphs.
Yes.
And if he's going to agree with the Beckwith paragraph, then he's going to agree with the pepper spray paragraph. then we've got a pattern. And that's what you look for. Patterns.
Well, what we've got is 2 paragraphs cut out from some other correspondence that he sent off, and some fiction squeezed in the middle. And again, he already gave the blanket denial that he never had any kind of direct contact with ET or ET recovered materials or knowledge of it or anything along those lines. So he did make that general denial. So it's not unreasonable to say that the paragraphs that relate to that are the ones that are not correct. I mean, we can pin that down, but I think that's where we're at with this.
Yeah, definitely. And I would love to be able to ask him if he has any knowledge of this major UFO event on the East Coast that he's talking, or at least someone's talking about.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and I think, yes, that the USS Nimitz encounter, is that what you're talking about?
No, that's the West Coast.
The West Coast. Okay. Frank, just to be clear, I want to make it clear regarding, I'm sorry, that Frank mentioned that the second paragraph, if it were authentic, I want to be clear that Commander Will Miller did not say that last paragraph was authentic. It's very important people understand that. If
and he also questioned the letterhead, which I think is key. He questioned the authenticity of the letterhead, that he never used that kind of letterhead. So there's that as well, which is again, his position, and he's purported to have written this letter. His position is, I didn't write this letter in this form. I mean, I think he made that clear enough. You can go for some details from him, but at the same token, all you're presenting is this memo. You need a little bit more to back it up. You need a little bit more to pin down this story. One thing I think you got to do is you got to place Wilson in Vegas at the particular date. I think you got to do that, or else you're going to have some problems going forward.
Okay, and just so everybody knows, we have Rich Hoffman in the chat room asking how would somebody get his letterhead and signature. And I actually did email after I spoke to Commander Will Miller by phone and by Skype today. I did email him on that, and I asked him that question because I had not asked him that prior. In that Skype or phone call, and he said anyone can find a naval officer's insignia. And what he meant by that is the letterhead, the insignia that's used on that letter. That's what he said regarding that.
And I think he acknowledged that parts of this correspondence, it's something that he wrote. He's taking credit for the Beckwith, and we didn't specifically ask about the signature, but I would say that that would be part of it too. Again, that's something that we could pin down.
Yes, exactly.
But again, he raised serious questions about the veracity of the letter, and that it's a problem.
I do have a question for Michael, and that is, if you had the opportunity to ask Commander Will Miller questions right now. What would you ask him? I know you've already stated them, but, please do just state them again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, definitely. I would definitely, first of all, ask him certain things in that 2-page letter, by the way, whether he can confirm or deny anything. For instance, did he live at that address that he's supposedly living at the top of this this letterhead?
Let's not get into that kind of detail. I can assure you that we're not going to go there. You have other fair questions, I'm sure, than that. We're not going to be having people hunting down addresses and all that stuff. Let's put it this way: we were able to contact Mr. Miller. He was not difficult to find. So let's move forward. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I would just basically ask him to confirm or deny, the different parts of the letter, because it sounds like there's a discrepancy on certain things that he did right. So that's
and we know Eric Davis does not live at that address in Las Vegas because he's working down in Austin, Texas. So he lives somewhere around there. And for the record, also that at that point in time, if that was his correct address, then he was working out of his house. So there's that. So we ran down a few things.
Or it was just mailed to his house.
Okay, so Alejandro Rojas is in chat, and he was mentioning that we can suspect some of this is real, but we have denials from, I think he's trying to say Wilson and now Miller, so we cannot take this to the bank. What is your response to that, Michael?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm just waiting for those denials. It's been since Thursday night that this document was leaked. Well, even before that, let's put it that way. Supposedly I read it, long time ago. So and of course, this document has been rumored by many people, Richard Dolan for sure, for many, many years, Grant Cameron and others. So the idea that, certain things are now being denied, I'm wondering what took them so long, for one thing.
I have a point I want to make about
took who
that.
so long? Nobody had contacted Miller.
That's
we were the
what
first
I was
people to
gonna
contact
say.
Miller.
Yeah,
Nobody else thought to do that.
I don't. That's what I don't understand.
Where's the vetting? Where's the research? Come on.
You don't think someone on Thursday night called Commander Miller and
I spoke to him
Wilson?
Monday. He told me nobody had contacted him.
Very interesting.
So yeah, that's what I had a question about too. And that I know I'm, being a little redundant in saying this, but here, let me go ahead and preface what I'm going to say with this. I contacted a well-known researcher, an Australian researcher, who is known for his impeccable research. And he told me that he saw this document 10 years ago, and that he felt it was not an authentic document. But he didn't bother calling this guy up either. I'm just guessing because he wasn't interested in doing so. But since he saw it 10 years ago, the very document we've been talking about, the smoking gun document, my question is, since it's been around for at least a decade, why has and this isn't, I'm not throwing shade at Richard Dolan when I say this. This is just an honest question. Why has nobody bothered to contact Commander Willard Miller to ask him these questions? It took us just, 24 hours to contact him.
I thought of doing it Sunday.
Yeah, and it took us, and he got back to us in almost instant.
And I spoke to him Monday.
He did state that he he does not want to be interviewed regarding this, actually go on a show. He doesn't want to go on a show, and he does not want to talk to anybody else about this. And that's what he was very emphatic about that.
Yeah, he suggested that he was going to change his phone number.
Yes, he said he's going to change his number. No, actually, he did confirm that to me in our conversation. And by the way, just so everybody knows, Commander Will Miller spoke to me after Frank, and he did say that he was going to do that.
Okay. So let's recap here. You're saying that you recently talked with an Australian UFO researcher who
Yes, I did.
He saw this same document 10 years ago.
Yes, that's what he said.
That
and I sent him a link to the document directly. He did look at it, and he said that here. Let me see if I can bring that up. Just one moment. There might be some silence for me, Frank. Just so you know, while I bring that up. Just one moment. Okay.
So, who is this Australian researcher?
Let me go ahead and read a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to actually give that source away, so I have to be cautious about that. But I'll read a little bit of an excerpt regarding what he did say. Again, there's going to be silence for me, Frank, while I look this up. Just one moment.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, now what's up with Richard Dolan? I think the ball's back in your court. You've got to come up with something a little more than the document itself, except the obvious things that the location. You're going to need more. And as far as Eric Davis saying no comment, Eric Davis doesn't really hold the UFO research community in very high regard. I think he's on record as having said that. So for him to just say no comment and sit back and, I'm not suggesting Eric Davis is involved with all this coming out. But what I am suggesting is, by saying no comment, he gives the opportunity to let a lot of UFO researchers get themselves all wound up over something that I'm not liking the looks of, quite frankly.
Yeah, fascinating. So you've spoken with this Australian researcher yourself, Frank?
Who, me? Well, yeah, I have many times, but I didn't have this.
Okay.
Yeah, I know who it is.
Oh, interesting. And he confirms that this is the same document that he saw 10 years ago.
Yeah, and what I'm doing is I'm actually, so I sent him a link to the smoking gun transcript. And then what I did was I asked him to review it, and then he responded. I'll let you know a little bit about what he said. But I also clicked on the link right now just to make sure that it's the one that we're covering right now. And it is that link. So I actually just clicked on it just to double check to make sure that is what he was looking at. And he said, I've had it for 10 years. That's what he said. And then he said, I'll tell you a little bit about what he said here. He said, provenance, ownership, exacting content, etc. of this Davis Wilson item will not be agreed upon and not proven at all in 12 months or 5 years or whatever. It will all be a distant, annoying memory and nothing will come of it. There will be no flooding us with alien spare parts. There will be no sudden opening of SAP records on reverse engineering of anything. There will be no comment in the probe from Admiral Wilson. There will be no confirmation of anything whatsoever from the current OSD/US offices. And right now they'll be shrugging shoulders with bemused looks. That's what he said.
Interesting. So he's basically saying that he knows that the provenance is not going to be proven.
That is his perspective.
Yeah. Wonder how he
are we ever going to get word in terms of who gave the documents to Grant?
I don't know.
Right.
I'm not.
And more recently, I mean, Grant was pretty gung-ho about this at first, but really is back. He's not talking about this at all. You are, and Richard Dolan is. Grant is, as far as I understand his public position, the way he left it, this could be the find of the century, but it could be BS as well. And he might have even gone really overboard for a polite Canadian and said bullshit. I can't remember. So I'm not sure of an exact quote on that. But that's essentially where he's at publicly on this. You're not really mentioning where Grant is right now on this. What's his opinion on these docs at the moment? Do you know?
Well, he's always said that he's 99% positive that these documents are true and correct and legitimate. And then again, Richard Dolan comes on his podcast just on Saturday and says that this document looks to be real. And the details included in this document, the people that are involved. Let's put it this way, you guys. If you were going to write a disinformation smoking gun memo, would you include a whole slew of people who are still alive and could testify against you or against the document or for the document?
Well, Michael, nobody's coming forward and testifying for the document, though.
Dates and times as well. Would you include all of that? I think if I was going to draft this, I would.
Well, you've got to pin it down, Michael. You've got to pin it down.
I would bring this down to a manageable form, is what I would do, and I'd have maybe 2-3 people named in the document that I could control and make sure that they're not going to get at and blow the lid off the thing. So that's an interesting thing that Richard Dolan is mentioning about this document. It's so detailed.
Well, there's no question about it. There's a lot of detailed work, but there's been a lot of detailed work that's gone into other documents that have not proven out that have come down the pike before. I mean, look at it this way. Basically, somebody was around in 2008, and they knew about the initial meeting regarding Wilson, Greer, and Mitchell. Okay, I mean, it was famous. It got out. It was written about in mainstream media. Mitchell and Greer talked about it enough. So, and Billy Cox at one point felt strongly enough and enough word had spread about it that he felt the need to contact Wilson. So it made the mainstream media, and it got attention just before I got into it. So I wasn't really aware of the specifics. I'm just finding out about it just really on Thursday. But it's not difficult at all, basically, to take that bit of information, okay, and say, okay, I'm going to write this fictional story, and Wilson, in my fictional story, basically he did all the things and did the follow-up and met with the aerospace company and so on and so forth, and was threatened later on when he tried to find out where the money trail was and find out more about the program, and that he couldn't get on the bigot list and so on and so forth. That part of it, you know, how difficult is it to make up? It's not that difficult to make up. There's a lot of name dropping in there, but the rest of it is as easily made up as it is fact. One thing that you can pin down is whether or not Wilson was in Vegas on the day. And again, that doesn't prove that this stuff is legit. It just proves that it's a little bit better research than I know that it is right at this moment. Because I'm looking at it and I'm not seeing a whole lot here. What I'm seeing is something that somebody could have taken this known incident and easily woven this scenario on the back end to the tail end of it. And for some reason, that information goes from Wilson to Eric Davis. I mean, that's what I'm seeing here. I'm not seeing enough to convince me that this is legit. That it's not even close at the moment.
Well, what I would like to do is I would like to put Judith Daly on the stand, the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Advanced Development at Austadt.
Oh, there's a lot of those folks I would like to talk to for sure.
Exactly. These are people who are named and real people. Most of them are still alive, by the way. And it would be very interesting to see how they're going to respond to some of these details in this memo. That's where you would actually start.
Well, it's up to researchers to get on that if they choose to. To be honest with you, I think this is a fuzzy disinformation. There might be some useful information in there. I found some things just poking around the margins on some old Fozy stuff, the old Majestic 12 documents. I found some really interesting stuff. A meeting in the White House about the 52 UFO case. That was a huge find for me. It really kept me going. So I'm not saying that there's no value, even if these are fake. I'm not saying there's no value in them, but you gotta call a story, and that's the way I'm seeing it now. And really, I think it's up to the people who think that these docs are legit to put a little bit more meat on those bones, because I'm seeing the bare bones of a fuzzy disinformation. And if you guys can come up with some more that get me interested in this and saying, well, it's a strange world we live in. Maybe it's real after all, but I'm just not seeing it at this point.
Well, there is another attorney that's mentioned in this document. On page 15, there is a guy that I would like to talk to. His name is Jeffrey W. Griffith. He supposedly is representing a Mary Elliott, who Commander Wilson is saying believes is the real deal as far as remote viewing goes. She has an attorney, and some of these people that are noted in here, of course, Ingo Swan and Axelrod, an RV reviewer woman who also went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and kind of astounded them as well. So these are the details that can be vetted or that can be thrown out if we get into the details. This is just one section of one page that needs to be answered.
Why hasn't that been done up to this point?
Because basically it's only been out as a public domain document for 3 days.
So, well, Grant's had it for quite some time, and apparently Dolan's had it. Do you know that they've done any follow-up in that regard?
I don't know. Matter of fact, I can't vouch for Grant Cameron, but I don't know. Richard Dolan has actually asked the hard questions as well. I do know that Richard has his own sources, and basically those sources are people that he is in contact with, I'm sure, trying to get some input on this document as well. So that's the next step, is to pick this thing apart and have people that are researching these things for years and know how to find them. Like you guys found Will Miller very quickly. I'll bet someone could find the details of some of these other folks.
These people have been contacted. It's just, you got to kind of approach them the right way. Like I say, I think it would be a big feather in your cap, and I'm kind of, I don't have that much of a dog in the fight. I'm expressing my opinion. It's like I don't look to debunk things or things like that. But, I'm a pro UFO guy, but, you can't believe everything you read. Let's put it that way. And UFO folks, you shouldn't believe everything you read too, unless of course I write it. But I think you got to go back to the drawing board a little bit and try to get Admiral Wilson pinned in Vegas on that particular date. If you do that, then I might be willing to turn around. But right now, I'm looking at this thing and I'm saying this belongs in the rearview mirror. And we're going to talk to Paul Dean tomorrow night and Steve Bassett on Sunday. You know what I mean? It's like,
wonderful.
next please. But it's up to you guys to get my attention and maybe we'll take a closer look in some other regard. But the document, to me, on its own, without talking to some people, without backing something up, without somebody going on the record saying, yeah, this, yeah, that, or like I said, even the simplest thing you could possibly do, pin Wilson into Vegas on the meeting date. If you can do that, get back to me when you do that. Let's put it that way. That's how I feel about this thing right about now.
Are you going to ask Stephen Bass? I would ask Stephen Bass what his opinion is of this document. That would be very fascinating, Frank.
We will. Sure. We have him on Sunday.
Well, Paul, we definitely are tomorrow because he's a document guy. So we'll be talking about it.
Right.
It'll come up. It'll come up.
I think that people will be asking a certain question. They'll be asking many questions, but among the many questions, Michael, one of them they'll be asking is, why did Grant Cameron not contact Commander Will Miller? Do you have any idea why he did not do that?
Well, here's what's going on with Grant. Grant approached me because he had this document. After many weeks and hours of discussion, we decided that the best way to deal with this document would be to fund it into a disclosure trust that I created for Grant so that it can be preserved, and or if anything happened to Grant, under the circumstances of the trust, these documents would be released. So basically, until he decided to come out full force and expose this document, release it himself, he was not going to go around and ask questions about it. That's basically the bottom line.
Well, the original plan was he was going to have this published in a book, if I remember correctly. He was going to try to hold on to it until he was able to get a book out.
Yes, right. That's
okay.
And obviously, whoever put these documents out there didn't want to wait around for Grant's publisher.
I think you're right. And that
got a little bit impatient. Wanted this stuff out there.
That goes to the question of who leaked this document. I have heard the theory being that this is green-lighted from Pentagon levels on down to be released. So no one has been able to come forth and say, well, it's been traced to this or traced to that. No one knows who leaked it.
Well, Grant did meet somebody who had at least one copy, though. We know that.
Say that again?
Grant did at least meet one person who had one copy of this. There are obviously a number of copies. Well, basically, there are thousands of copies now. I mean, I've downloaded a copy. I've got a copy now. But at least at one point in time, there had to have been a relatively limited number of copies. And we don't know for sure if this guy had one or multiple. I mean, if he had one, he could have made 1 million and sent them out. And he could have been the guy who leaked this as well. The guy who initially gave the document to Grant.
It could be.
Okay, back to my question. I'm just going to be redundant.
And Grant is not going to identify this person?
No, not at this time. Sure.
No,
I'm sorry. Chant, you spoke over Michael's answer. Grant, is it correct that Grant is not going to ID the person who gave him the doc?
No, he isn't.
Because that's how we can find out who at least has a reasonable chance of being the person who also leaked the doc. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
you know what I'm saying here, Michael?
Are you guys going to leak the person, the Australian researcher?
I don't know who that is.
You don't know who that is? I thought you said you did.
No. I said it was an Australian researcher, not Keith Basterfield or Paul Dean. Beyond that, I don't know who it is.
Oh, so you didn't talk with that person that claims that he saw this document 10 years ago?
I did. I spoke to that person right before the show today.
Okay, so Chant knows who it is.
Yes, I do. What I was going to ask you again, and I am going to be redundant, is I was going to ask you, why did Grant not bother to do his due diligence and research this document? Reason I'm asking that is because he's known as a researcher. And if he wanted to expose this document later and have that plan, would he not at least want to back it up with some kind of due diligence related research that is normal for researchers to do regarding documents that may need authentication of some kind?
Well, I think you're giving Grant Cameron an attribute that's false. He is probably the more detailed researcher that I've ever seen in my life. And basically, he is, during the last 6 to 8 months that he's had this document, he was going through just like I was, trying to figure out if there was any discrepancies in this document that we could pick apart. So for sure, he's doing that. He's not going to contact Commander Miller. He's not going to contact some of these remote viewers. That would basically tip the hat that he actually had this document. No one knew that he actually had this document.
Okay, well, my question would still remain the same, regardless of what you just said, because my point is still the same.
Yeah, I mean, you could call Will Miller and ask him questions, without you ask him the questions that you want to basically confirm, hey, do you know Bob Beckwith? Do you know this guy who's in Vegas who ran the business, and so on and so forth? I mean,
it'd be a little suspicious why he's calling and asking about Bob Beckwith.
Maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but you gotta make some kind of an effort here if you want to put this forward and say, well, I understand Grant isn't putting this forward. I don't know, as he got closer to publication time, that he might have done all those things. He wasn't expecting it to come out either. That's my is that about right, or is that a wrong assumption? I'm assuming that he didn't know this was going to drop.
Oh, exactly. No, this came out.
And he hadn't picked up on the fact that it had been on Reddit for roughly a month and a half.
No, and I didn't either. So that's for sure. Yeah. Matter of fact, I didn't hear from anyone either that it was out on Reddit.
Okay, so wait, Frank.
Reddit
please,
can be a useful place, but I don't go there that much. And also another thing, one more point, Chant. It was sitting in the Reddit forum. Now, most of the UFO nuts over at Reddit go to the UFO forum, and this was actually sitting on the aliens forum. So I don't know I would think that caused part of the delay in the at-large UFO crowd and picking up on it in the first place. I think we would have picked up on it a lot quicker if it had been posted in the UFO forum.
Does anybody have a screenshot of that?
I do not, but I'll go with it, and if I'm wrong, I'll cut my pay 10%.
That would be interesting to see if the actual.
No, that wouldn't be interesting at all to see my pay cut 10%. Wouldn't be. I'd have to get a day job.
No, that would be interesting to see if it was actually proven that it was released on Reddit.
Like I said, it's been talked about. It's been confirmed by enough people. It's been over there for a little while. So, exact date, I don't know.
Well, so is this 15-page memo.
What do you mean?
You're saying that just because a lot of folks confirmed this thing was released on Reddit, I equate that to there's a lot of folks, including Richard Dolan and others, that have confirmed the existence of this memo.
From before, sure. But what I'm saying is it got out. It was first leaked over on Reddit. Somebody got hold of it and posted it on Reddit, and maybe it didn't get enough attention, so they decided to go with the Imgur file.
Yeah, and that's what I'd like to prove.
I mean, somebody obviously wanted it out there. I think that's fairly obvious. That's not too much of a leap there. I don't think that's too much of an assumption. Somebody obviously wanted it out. So
exactly.
And in fairness to Grant, we don't know that when the time is right, as he got closer to publication date, he wasn't going to do all this stuff. Again, this came out not under his control. So there's that.
No,
I want to be fair here. We're
assuming that he did not do this stuff. I'm going to tell you right now, he did do his due diligence from the very beginning. Otherwise, he wouldn't even contacted me. And indeed, together, we did due diligence as well.
Okay.
What kind of due
and I'm glad
diligence,
you made that
Michael?
clear.
I mean, you're not revealing the source of the document. Did you make contacts? Did you talk to people that said, yeah, this is legit?
No, I did the due diligence of the details of the document. I'm trying to find out if dates are incorrect, if names are incorrect or made up, if organizations existed at the time. Those are what I'm talking about, vetting the document.
Well, they got that right. They got that right as far as the intersection in Vegas. I mean, that was one of the first things that I checked out. The intersection in Vegas, down the street, the old EG&G building. It's right there. We did that kind of stuff here, and I'm wondering why why the folks who are saying this is the leak of the century aren't really providing those kind of details. They're just talking about this is the leak of the century. Let me read through this and not really do at least provide any of the background checking that might have been done, and just saying this is incredible. major news media is going to pick up on this before you know it, and this is going to blow up into something incredible. And on this, I don't see the news media picking up on this. It just isn't enough to go on at this point. You need more. You need a lot more pinned down.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that Grant Cameron did do his due diligence regarding this document, and he explained how he did. And you also explained his plan regarding why he wanted to reveal the document in the manner he did, and also not reveal the document to folks that were mentioned in the document because he didn't want to give the document away. That would be correct, right?
Yes, and specifically, Grant was going to, at that point, redact the document from names. He was not going to release the document outing people. That was what we discussed. So if indeed...
does that include the names of Wilson and Davis?
No. No,
Okay.
let me tell you this. Yes, that included redacting Wilson and Davis's names. That's exactly what we talked about, because that would kind of be a domino effect on some of these other things if we're getting into the details of these meetings. So indeed, that was Grant's theory, that he is going to get this document out there, redacted, take all the names out of it, and he was going to allow the researchers out there that know about the details and have been talking about this document to actually supply the names. And that's basically where he was headed when all of a sudden this thing was unredacted and released.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that because, Grant Cameron has been researching the topic of ufology and other phenomena since 1974, 1975. And, he's an icon in the field of ufology. Also, I'd like to mention something about Grant Cameron that I've mentioned a few times that you said was completely accurate, Michael. And that is, Grant Cameron would never, ever accept a document that is classified from anyone.
Correct.
And this document is not classified. It does not have any DoD markings on it. It does not have a classification mark of any kind on it. This document is it is actually not classified at all. Correct, Michael?
Yes, exactly. And that even goes to Grant's even further sterling personality, in the fact that even though it was unclassified, he still did not want to out the actual people in the document itself. He was willing to get the document out for the purposes of the details, but not the names.
Okay. Thank you very much for having confirmed that. Really appreciate it. And this show was not meant to throw any shade at Grant Cameron at all. It was really just meant to review this interesting smoking gun document that you so graciously gave us.
I want to jump in here and just say, look, we're disagreeing here without being disagreeable. And we don't want to start, a lot of heated back and forth over this. We followed up on the leads that we had based on the document was there. And my experience and the leads that we generated, the conversations that we had with the commander, it raising some serious questions for me, and a lot of serious charges have gotten flown around too. I mean, basically, we're talking about, this is a forgery, this is a fake, at least the letter part. So, obviously, no forgery is inferred regarding the notes from the meeting because the way it stands for me now, it looks to me like it's a just complete fan fiction. But so there are serious charges being thrown around. Let's face it, the commander himself is saying that basically the letter part of the documents, pages 3 and 4, the letter part is fabrication. And that is pretty serious, but that's where we're at now. And I think that, basically the ball is in the proponent's court. You've got to bring something back to the table here that that clears some of this stuff up. And like I say, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think you got to put Admiral Wilson in Vegas, and again, that'll be a help. But still, I don't think it proves much of anything. And obviously, he's spoken before about this. He's basically denied that the sort of things outlined in the claims from Mitchell and Greer were accurate. And actually, the commander confirmed that as well, that there wasn't any follow-up on the Navy's part after that meeting with Greer and Mitchell. So, I mean, that's where it's at. I wish you good luck. You know, I hope I'm wrong about this, but it's not looking through to me.
Thank you both. Yeah, by the way, then on page 15, there's a wrench thrown in there where Gansler says UFOs are real, alien abductions are not. He's
That's interesting.
He will be tough to get hold of because he has passed away recently. So that's one guy you can't follow up with. Yeah. But there's some other stuff in there. And again, I think
very interesting.
Yeah. So
okay,
I think it's up to the proponents. You got to come back with a little bit more than the memo itself. There's just not enough here. You need some people to go on the record and need a few things, some details confirmed.
What I was going to say is I talked to Commander Will Miller about the journal that Eric Davis was allegedly wrote in this smoking gun document. And I asked what he thought about it. And he said that he had a hard time with it because it looked to him from his perspective that Eric Davis, if he wrote this journal, would have to have had a photographic memory in order to have written the journal in the massive detail that he did.
Either that or a digital recorder.
Yeah.
Good point. Yes, very good point. And so, who do you know can actually write in this manner as if they're writing a play, line for line, that accurately, if it were allegedly that accurate?
It would be interesting to see if maybe Dr. Davis knows shorthand. You never know, he might.
But who do you know can actually write in that manner after having had many hours of a meeting or days of
like
meetings,
an hour and change. It was about an hour and change for this particular meeting.
But to actually even write 10 minutes of a meeting, word for word, exactly how an individual may have spoke and the behavior patterns they may have had and the reactions that they may have given or registered to questions or answers. It's almost written like a play. So, Commander Will Miller said that he had an issue that from his perspective, it just felt to him as though this would have to have been done in the manner of somebody that had a photographic memory. That was his perspective.
Well, there is a clue in this document of how this thing was put down in a transcript form, because at one point, Admiral Wilson is asking Davis towards the end of the interview, what are you going to do with this? The idea being that maybe Davis is taking notes at the same time he's asking questions, and or maybe Admiral Wilson is asking him, what are you going to do with this recording?
Yep. Yeah. And if the meeting did happen as purported, I can see that as happening. I'm not too concerned about that. That's not one of my big gripes with the document. So. Yeah. But it's something that the commander brought up. It's something that struck him. So it's reasonable to bring it up.
I do have before we wrap up, I do have a question for Michael, and it's a two-tiered question. The question is, what is the takeaway from this document, the smoking gun document? What is the takeaway for you? Whether, we nitpick it and tear it apart or somebody else does, regardless, just let all that go away. And just from your perspective, how you feel about the document, what you think is important, what is your takeaway from it?
What I take away from this document, if indeed anything in this document is correct, it looks to me that there is a private organization or cabal, whatever you want to call it, who is in charge of independent civilian subcontractors that are working for the government that don't have any government oversight, military oversight, or any oversight at all, other than their own bigot list and their own basic ideas of who they should allow into this program, plus the Pentagon back them up.
And that general proposition can be true and these documents still be fake.
And that's what I take away from this.
And so let's just say this document was authentic in its entirety. What would the American public, what would they take from this? What is the value of it to them?
I think if the President of the United States, congressional members and staffers in the military are not involved in potentially whatever you want to call it, crash retrieval, reverse engineering programs, or anything that even has to do with recovered Soviet or Chinese technology. Let's put it that way. Let's call it terrestrial reverse engineering. Mm-hmm. If our elected and military officials do not know about it, there's a problem.
All right, and yeah, we want to wrap up now, Chant. And just finally, thanks for coming on, Michael. I really do appreciate it. We're you know, you didn't spend as much time as with us as you did with Jimmy Church, but we were a little tougher on you, so they might have been more intense minutes, and you didn't get commercial breaks. So I really appreciate it. I really do.
Oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you, Frank and Chant. This was the best discussion I've ever had so far.
Wait, no, Frank, actually, I'm sorry. I do have another question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Yep. Michael, my question is, what is the takeaway for Grant Cameron on this document? Did he share that with you?
No, not yet. I would imagine you've got to realize that for the 6 to 8 month period that Grant Cameron has been living with this knowledge of a document like this, mm-hmm. He has told me that not a day goes by where he at least spends 2 hours or more just mulling over the fact that he has the document, what he should do with it. The stress that this man has been under, I can verify. And I'm hoping that he's going to get a little bit of a vindication of, you know what, he can rest a little bit now that this thing is out there. The whole idea of having a secret like this that could be the smoking gun UFO memo of the century and not being able to tell people about it has got to be very stressful.
And I also like to make clear, but I need you to do it for us, Michael. So I'll go and give you the question so you can set us straight and set the whole world straight on this. The document that Grant Cameron has within his possession, this smoking gun document, is it the original or is it a copy?
I don't know if the document that he initially was given was an original or a copy. I do believe it probably came off of a computer printout that he got. But basically, Grant is confirming that the document that's being released right now is the same one that he had.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. That's
and
very
obviously,
important for us to know.
If we do accept the document as purported, it was obviously typed in after the fact. It's not like no one's suggesting that Eric Davis had his laptop with him, for example, just typing these notes out. Again, reasonable if they're legit that he had some kind of a mini recorder or was taking very good notes and was able to type up his notes after the meeting.
Right. And that the perspective that Commander Will Miller shared regarding he felt just having quickly scanned that this smoking gun document, his first reaction was that this would need to have been possibly a person with photographic memory to have that kind of great recall. That does not necessarily reflect anybody else's opinion on this show or anybody else that we know. Also, to give Commander Will Miller the benefit of the doubt, he may not have had the opportunity to really give a little bit more benefit of the doubt in the sense that Frank just shared, that if Eric Davis did actually write this journal, that he, whether he had a recorder on him or whether he had some kind of word processor or typewriter, whatever, or writing notes while he's talking to somebody, we don't know. That's up in the air.
Yeah, that's not a part of the document I have a particular issue with. I
But
think,
still, it's important for,
understood.
it's
Yeah,
funny.
that's his perspective. Yep.
It's funny because, people feel like certain parts of this document are more important than the other. And when I was speaking to Commander Will Miller today, I knew for a fact that all the questions I had to ask him would not have been enough, because I knew later that when I brought up everything that he had to say, somebody else would say, up, but did you ask this? And, rightfully so, of course. But this is more important. Did you ask him this? And, it's like, how can anybody be that omnipresent to have known, hey, let's ask you in totality all the questions everybody in the future would ask you about.
Did you write this? Did you write that? You got 1, 2,
right.
3, 4,
But-
5, 6,
but-
7, 8, 9 on one page.
Right. So there's no way I could have asked everybody's question of him today, but I did do the best I could under the circumstances.
And, I think we did a great job here. We got a source on the record who's intrinsically involved in these docs, and that's where we're at right now. And, I think...
yes,
it's back. It's back in your court, Michael. For us to get interested in this again, you're going to have to come back with something more, I think.
My pleasure.
Okay,
Michael,
great.
thank you very much for having been on.
Yep.
By the way, I would like to let everybody know that Michael Hall, the paranormal lawyer who is the head of the UFOI team, is a regular on our panels for a reason. We absolutely adore him. He is an authority on many topics. He goes back decades regarding the topic of ufology. He has known many iconic people in the realm of ufology and has had personal relationships with them. And so we just really are so grateful to have had you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Chant.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I appreciate it. And I wish you good luck. I urge the folks listening, even if you are skeptical of this type of thing, and you should be in terms of literal truth, you never know. There might be a lead in there for you. It might be something. Something really good could come out of this, even if this particular leak bellies up. So, stay on it, because you just never know. It's a crazy field, and who knows if something's buried in there. Again, we don't know for sure who put these together. Maybe it was Eric Davis, maybe it wasn't, but he's still saying no comment. We will see. And good night, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow night with Paul Dean. Thanks a lot for joining us. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Can you make sure we're not